So we're absolutely delighted to be sitting here with Mr. Philip Ebanks, candidate for Red Bay. And we're going to get to learn a little bit about him. I know a lot of voters in the Red Bay area might not know a lot about Philip. He does live literally right here.
That's correct.
So we can get some details on that for sure. He's been in the constituency and for many, many years now. So we'll get to know him a bit better. So good afternoon. Philip, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you in our candidate feature.
Good afternoon, Sandra. It's likewise all my pleasure to have this opportunity to be interviewed. And I'd like to first of all start off by saying to the good people of Red Bay, good evening, good people of Cayman, good evening, and thanks so much for all the kind words on this candidacy. And I really appreciate that and look forward to the opportunity to serve.
Yes, well, we're delighted to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Now, I do want to just kind of chat with you a little bit about who is Philip Ebanks. I mean, I think some of us know you from different walks of life, you know.
Yeah.
I know Philip the lawyer. Some people are like, no, he's the police. And then some people are like, are you sure you're talking about the same person?
Yeah.
So we're going to get into all of that so that people can know your professional history and background. But let's dial it back all the way to Philip the little boy.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So which district do you originally hail from?
Yeah, originally from West Bay, born
Okay.
in 1961, so that's now 61 years ago.
Yes.
1963, sorry, so 61 years ago, in the district of West Bay. I grew up there, and actually I started my work life at about 13. I was in the tourism industry in the very early days as a busboy. Worked with the likes of Miss Vadley Douglas and Clorette Anglin, two really well-known tourism pioneers. They were the waitresses and I was the head busboy. And after school, I came out of school at...
But wait a minute, you've gone too far for us.
Okay.
We want to dial it back. Even before then, even before 13. So you grew up in West Bay. What part of West Bay are you from?
Well, you know, West Bay, I grew up partially in the district of Boatswain Bay.
Okay,
And
the area of
then
Boatswain Bay. Okay.
Also, a lot of part of my sort of teenage years I spent in the district of Barkers, or Bacchus, as we call it. So sort of West Bay is my stomping ground, and I have
Yes.
these sort of different areas.
Yeah.
And part of it was because growing up, we had, we lived with my grandparents for a while, and then my father, after he went to sea, he built the house in Barkers, or Bacchus, as we call it. And so the latter part of my sort of teenage years,
You were in Bacchus area.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so let's talk about your family dynamics if we can a little bit. Of course, I know your mom, a lovely lady. Her and I have sat down at many a Domino's table over
Yes,
the years.
Yes.
So you mentioned your father was a seaman. So I'm assuming then that your mom would have been staying at home with the kids while your dad was off at sea.
Yes, mom and dad, if you
Yeah.
think about it. And she worked in the tourism industry as well. So my early days were heavily influenced by seeing people in the tourism department and really in service.
Yes.
And I think that's shaped me in kind of who I've become in terms of being service oriented. I spent time in the police department, and clearly there's service involved there.
Yes.
And then in more recent times, again, as an attorney at law, again, service has been central to who I am,
Right.
and what I've become, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, how many children did your mom have? How many kids were in the family? And were you the youngest, the middle child? Where did you fall in the mix?
I was the eldest. I'm 6
okay.
years older than my sisters, and they're twins.
Yes.
And probably, in a sense, even better known than I am.
Yes.
Wendy and Wanda. Wanda is a partner at Maples, and Wendy is also in the senior finance executive in Maples. So yes, we grew up a family of 3 children, and mom and dad, and most of that part of my life was in the house in Barkers, where we all kind of came together, and it was I had a good good childhood.
Yeah.
I can't say
You
no
can't
about it.
complain, yeah.
Yes.
So as the eldest, and then you have two sisters, you must have been extremely protective of them because, you know, there's so much responsibility. I'm the youngest, so I only know this from what people tell me, but there's a lot of responsibility oftentimes that comes with being the eldest child. And you said there's like a 6-year difference. Were you the one, like, you know, if anybody was picking on little Wanda and Wendy, they'd come and run to big brother Philip and you took care of everything for them?
Oh, absolutely. My sisters we've always been close. We've always been near and dear. One of the favorite stories, and they'll tell this, is that when I was about 13 and I was a busboy at Spanish Bay Reef, which was right down the road from where we lived. I come home in the evenings after 2 or 3 hours of work, and they would be so happy to just shake my pockets out because there would be tips. And so they always talk about that, that
Yes.
they would get tips and they would, kind of supplement, go to school and so on and so forth. Back in that time, things were tight.
Yes.
And we lived tightly as a family. And there was an expectation that if you went out there as a part of the family and you made a little bit of money, yeah, you could keep some for yourself, but
Family
you would
first.
contribute into the family. And so it was just part of the way that we did things. And
Yes.
I'm so pleased and proud to have had that opportunity.
Yeah. You saw your dad going off to see Philip. Was there anywhere in the back of your mind where you thought to yourself, oh, I want to do that. I want to see the world. I want to travel. I'm sure he would have come back home telling you as the only boy in the family, all sorts of amazing adventures and stories.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting story because I remember my father coming back from sea, and obviously I had been, I was born in 1963, and he was away at sea while I was born. So he came back in 64 or thereabouts, and when he came in, interestingly, I was scared of the man. I didn't know who he was. It took me a couple of days, maybe a week or so, to just kind of become acclimated to who he was. And I remember my mom being very stern with me and said, hey, no, listen, that's your dad. You go to him. And it was like, at the time, I was like, why are you going to do that to me? But it was the way that the interaction between adults and children was at the time. And so I went to him, and he figured a way to kind of wind himself into my life.
Yes.
I remember one of the things that he would do is he would take me and sit me up on his lap, and so I could drive the car. And that was something that I think it endears every 4-year-old to their father.
Yes.
That kind of relationship. And then about myself and the opportunity to go to sea, up until I was about 14, 15, thereabouts, there was still this kind of what will you do once you come out of school idea.
Right.
And the thought crossed my mind about whether I would become a seaman. And I remember hearing my father talk about what seamanship and what sea life was about. And there was something about it that was adventurous and enticing. But by the time I reached 16, Cayman was starting to change away from that. And all of a sudden, there was jobs and things available. The finance system and finance area was also starting to rear, just coming out. And of course, tourism was always one of those things that was also on its way up. So it became not a necessity anymore. I think in my high school, there was one person that actually went to sea, and interestingly, Mr. Paul Hurston, who also went on to become the port director, went to sea because his father was a captain on a ship, and there was just something there that actually happened. But he's the only one that I know that was in my year that actually went to sea.
Oh, that's so interesting. So you were really on the cusp when you were born and when you came into manhood. You were on the cusp of Cayman's transition.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So interesting. Wow.
Yes.
I'm younger than you, so it's interesting to hear these stories from the perspective of people who were growing up in that time and actually experienced it. So you had many more opportunities then available to you.
Absolutely. Opportunities have started to come into their own. And I saw a marked transition from the way, say, that my mom sort of was interested in me from an educational perspective to the way that she was in relation to my sisters. And it was simply because I think, in the back of her mind, she knew that I could read and write and do those things that were necessary, which was all that my father had to do in order to go to sea.
Right.
But along comes, the opportunity, the finance system, is becoming part of it. And so all of a sudden, education became a top priority. And my sisters, she really, really, really tightened down on them. I did fine in school. I was okay. I wouldn't say that I was this brilliant student. I was probably a little bit above average, but not a lot. And and part of that was the emphasis that I would be able to, I had sufficient to make my way within what they saw at the time as being the choices for employment.
Right. Interesting. All right. So you get to your teenage years. What were some of the things as a young man that you enjoyed doing? Were you into fishing? Tell us a little bit about on your fun time when you didn't have the responsibilities. What did you actually enjoy doing?
Oh yes, from the early days, one of the things that I would always remember is that you came around sort of March and April when you started to get a lot of rain, and the sections where I was in, certainly in Boatswain Bay, it was low lying. And one of the things that people find strange today, but as kids we just love to play in the water. Nowadays you'd be completely frowned down as being one of those things where you say, oh, well, you're going to pick up a disease. But back in the day, that was a favorite thing that we did as very young children. I'm thinking 5-6 years old. And then obviously as I got up more, that my mom would kind of let me out of her sight, and I'm talking about 12, 13. I had friends and we loved the beach, we loved to dive, we loved to do spear fishing, and that was the kind of things that we did at that age. I also played football. You mightn't believe it now, but I was pretty good. And certainly, friends that, in the neighborhood and in the area, Denny Dilbert and Clinton Mohammed and Mario, we stuck very close together, very cohesive sort of West Bay group, and we went through all the high school together like that, but very close, did everything together.
So you would have been at the Cayman Islands High School. So your education went from, there was still the primary school in West Bay?
Yes, there was. I know this is interesting. My education kind of took a different turn than Mario's did, because we both started out in the Johnny Cumber Primary School. And then at some point, my dad said, hey, listen, that boy is going to Triple C school. And it was simple because at the time, one of those things that was a part of how reading was learned was by word recognition. You'd see CAT and then you see the picture of a cat.
Right.
And you learn to recognize the word. And I didn't do really well under that system. I did okay with the simpler words, but as they became more, I just couldn't get it. But when I went to Triple C school, they had this new subject, new for Cayman at the time, called phonics, where you sound the letters out.
Right.
And, it was just like a complete revelation for me, and I took off in the sense of, I wanted to read everything after that, and I became a real reading addict. I love Western books in particular, Louis L'Amour, and the ideas and thoughts about the Wild West was just absolutely, it just kept me
enamoring for you.
Enamored, yes. And so I became a very avid reader. And I believe that that's probably one of the things that will help with the growth of individuals. If you can get them interested in reading,
yes,
then the world opens up to them.
Yeah.
And I think that today because we don't use books as much, it's mostly online, and it's not the same thing, you know. We've got to keep books available in the classrooms and for the development of children, so that they can become really, you know, it can become really important and integral to who they are. And certainly reading, I think, is the key. Once we capture that, then other things fall into line.
Yeah, I mean, it opens, as you rightfully said, so many opportunities, you know, educational opportunities, job opportunities. So it's key to anything, I think, that you do in life. So it's interesting to see how you talk about one method of learning worked for you, whereas the other one, which is the more traditional method, wasn't really giving you, because everybody, you know, sometimes people learn a little bit differently. So that's very, very, very interesting to hear from an educational perspective. Something that I think parents, you know, should definitely keep in mind as well. So you then so you went to Triple C. So then did you do high school at Triple C? Did they go all the way up to?
Yeah, what happened is that about 4th or 5th grade, I was actually at an age and at a standard that I was able to transition into high school, the government high school. And, you know, I had a choice. I could have stayed with Triple C school, but I also wanted to press on, and you know, so many of my friends were going to the high school. And of course, private school is great, but it's an expensive venture. And my family had really, you know, they had done a lot to make sure that I had that opportunity to go to private school. And at that juncture, it didn't seem like it was 100% necessary for me to continue in private school. I think that there's a benefit, you know, in some senses, to being able to go to private school, but also having that wider interaction with the people in your district and island-wide, to go on to a public high school. I met so many people that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet had I stayed in private school. And I think that is also one of those things that has added to my ability to interact and collaborate on people. I still remember a lot of my really good Triple C friends, you know, Bill Crichton and Peanut, you know, and Craig Merrin. And of course, I also have so many high school friends, you know, Lee Ramone and those guys, and of course, as I've said, Mario and Denny and those guys from West Bay. So we had you know, I've had a really full opportunity to integrate and know different people at different stages, and I think that's really
you're the best of both worlds, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. So what were your strengths in school? You talked about the fact that you enjoyed reading, but did you lean towards anything specifically as you're then getting into that 14, 15 years old, where you're starting to think, okay, what am I going to possibly do with my life? Like, what were you thinking? Like, am I into sciences? What did you feel were your strengths at that time?
You know, this is always interesting when people ask me these questions, because to be frank with you, I was an average student, very average student. I did 3 or 4 CSC subjects and 3 or 4 GC subjects. So, and I did, some of the stuff that I did was sort of hands-on stuff. I did auto mechanics. I like that. And I did, you know, the usual maths and English and human biology. But I didn't really find anything in particular at that age that was riveting to me in the school system. Strangely enough, one of the things that I quite enjoyed was that during my period of, say, 13, 15, that period, I had taken a scuba diving lesson, and I'd done some of that with Atlee Evans and those, you know, the old pioneer dive masters. And I enjoyed being outdoors, and I enjoyed the freedom that it gave me. And so right after high school, I went into diving. I went up to San Diego and I did a diving instructor's certificate. And I came back and I worked for Mr. Adrian Briggs. You know, these are people who, you know, today just mean the world to me. Atlee Evans also hired me at various different points. But it was a kind of a free time, you know, and I think that that's also important, is that you do get some opportunity to breathe a little bit and kind of do, you know, be active. Please
Yes.
don't not be active. Do not be doing something.
Something, yes.
But realize that you're in this evolution, and you're like a butterfly. I think you're getting ready to do something, and sometimes you're not even sure exactly what that is. So between sort of 16 and 18, I floated around. I enjoyed diving.
Yep.
and you know, interacting with tourists. I think it gave me a good opportunity as well to kind of build up certain skills, those skills of being able to communicate and be easy to talk to. And I can't say more about that
Yes.
than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you make a valid point, because a lot of young people feel the pressure to know at 16, 17, even 18, what they want to do for the rest of their lives. It's like, come on, you know, life is going to throw all sorts of things at you. You might have multiple career changes. So I agree that those initial years are about just experience of living a little bit, having, like you said, be doing something productive,
That's right.
but knowing that, you know what, I'm not going to necessarily be a dive master for the rest of my life.
Right.
But at this place in time, it's valuable experience, and you're still learning quite a bit in the industry. So your early days, you started on tourism, and then we know that eventually at some point you actually became a police officer. How did you transition?
Yeah, it's interesting when you hear the stories today about not being able to attract sufficient Caymanians into some of the services. I know we recently had one where I think there's 14 Caymanians that have been recruited into service, and that's a great thing. But you know, back in 1981, late part of 1981, I remember Mr. Rudy Evans, ex-Deputy Commissioner Rudy Evans, who, by the way, also nominated me, coming into the district, and he was a man with a mission, and his mission was simply this: he was going out there to find the Caymanians where they were, and he was going to recruit Caymanians to come into the service. And on that occasion, I think he actually found 12, and we're talking now back in 1981. So where there's a will, there's a way, but there's got to be an emphasis. You know, people that joined and came through that recruit training course would have been people like myself, Mr. Charles Clifford, ex-Minister of Government, and various others. And so we started off as being effectively young men out of school in the district, you know, doing something. You know, I think Charles actually started a little bit earlier than me, because they also had a recruit constable program that going in. So I think he started off at about 16 or 17. I came in just at about 18 and joined in 19. I was 18 in 1981, and then in 1982, February of 1982, I joined the service. And of course, you know, it's history is there. You know, I went up the ladder. I worked diligently. You know, again, the other thing that sometimes people don't quite get is that when you join and you start a career, you don't always start with this commitment that this is going to be the end of, you know, this is going to be it. You begin with this perspective, some simple perspectives really. One, I need a job. Two, I know that I have got to create value. Three, I know that if I do create value, better things are going to come to me, either in this job or in another job.
Yes.
And that's the way I've always faced life. I've always worked on ensuring that I take full advantage of the opportunity to be employed by whoever's employing me, and to make sure I create the value there that they want to keep me. And so that's one of the things that I think I took from from working in tourism section, and then I kind of transitioned over into the police department, and I went up the ladder as sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, and then finally, a couple of years before I actually resigned to go into the general public service, I was promoted to superintendent. So good, very good career. I'm proud of it, pleased with it. You know, people ask me all the time, said, Philip, what do you miss most about it? And you know what? I think it's the same all the way around. You miss the people, the people. That's what's been most important to me. Today, you know, my comrades, you know, we see each other and we have to spend a little time and just kind of catch up.
Yes. And how long were you at the police force for?
I was there just 17, just
Wow.
under 18 years in total time.
Wow. So that was
Yes.
quite a fulfilling career.
Yes. And I was pleased. I was I think the youngest inspector, or one of the youngest inspectors. I was certainly the youngest chief inspector, and then the youngest superintendent as well. So I did have a good career. In many respects, people that know me say, Philip, you fit the bill. And I guess I in some sense, I fit the bill. And, you know, I'm pleased and proud of that career and that opportunity to serve the people of Cayman.
And then you mentioned that after you left there, you went into the general service. So where did you transition to?
Yeah, well, in 1997, now Honorable Thomas Jefferson, you know, now deceased, he called on me and he said, Philip, I'd like you to be the first director of licensing. And I thought about it, and he was insistent, you know, because I had already by that time gotten my legal degree, and I had played quite a role and interacted in circles where Mr. Jefferson could see what I was capable of doing,
Right.
and my man management and my ability to get things done through people. And I think that's why he was insistent that I should come over, and I became the first director of licensing. New law had just been put into effect.
Right.
And so I took what was effectively a section before that, and I formed it to, you know,
A
put all the
department.
infrastructure. And now it is today. Most of the forms that you see there actually today are forms that I formulated back in 1997. You know, minor tweaks and changes, of course.
Right,
But
right.
I'm really proud of that period of my public
So the
service.
first director basically of DVDL, what we now call DVDL.
That's right.
So interesting.
And also,
So you mentioned, just let me stick a pin because we kind of glossed over this, but you mentioned at that point you had your law degree. So you went to law school while you're working with the police force.
that's correct. That was, again, you know, when you take on a job and you do it well, people see the opportunity for you to progress. Okay, and I think that's just as important as you seeing the opportunity for you to progress.
Absolutely.
You find that then they're receptive to investing into you, and the the police service were willing to invest into me in terms of allowing me to have some time off. You know, I got a government scholarship. I went to Cayman Islands Law School, and I got my degree. Went on and got my professional practice course. And so all of that was done somewhere around 1993, 1994, leading up to 1996, 1997. So, you know, opportunities will arise, I think, for those who are willing to put themselves out there a little bit, and never be afraid to just get on with it and realize that, you know, it's your investment in yourself as well. Don't expect that everybody's going to drop what they're doing to just pick up the slack for you. You got to keep up with the things that you have as your duty, and you got to burn some lamplight, they say, some oil in the night, and you got to give up on many of the things that, you know, you would prefer to be doing. You know, some of your family life gets missed, and, you know, opportunities to be with your friends. But at the end of the day, the investment is there. You invest it into yourself, but the opportunity is being created by others around you who see the potential for you to progress.
Yes, making sacrifices really. So that's very, very nice. So at the point then that you're well positioned to start up a new department, that you had to make sure that the law was being followed. You were implementing procedural components within the civil service. So I would have seen why Mr. Jefferson would have found you to be a very good candidate to start up DVDL, to start up that department with your policing background as well as your legal degree as well. So you went and you started that up. You had that running. How long were you there at DVDL for?
I was DVDL for about 3.5, 4 years.
Okay.
But interestingly, one of the other things, and this was one of the other reasons why Mr. Jefferson kind of wanted me in the picture, was that it was about that time that we passed within the traffic law, the Public Transport Board. And so I started and I sort of created the systems around that. The systems for licensing of omnibuses and taxis and tour buses and the systems that we see now in place. And I want people to just take a deep breath, because one of the things that people say is that we obviously don't have a really well functioning public transport system, and that's absolutely true. But that's kind of where it started, and the reality is that in the subsequent governments, they didn't really see fit to really progress with that really early stage of development of public transport.
Right.
And so today they're doing the same thing that they did
way back when.
30 years
wow.
ago. Yes.
Yeah. So that's again very interesting insight there. So you were instrumental in that at DVDL. You were there for about 3.5 years, and then you got the itch to do something else.
Yes. I Hunter and Hunter, and I advertised about perhaps doing articles, and the thought was with me that I felt that at that stage, obviously I was quite comfortable, a director of licensing, making pretty decent money for the day, and today a lot more. They're making a lot more, but I thought that I wanted to just get. I wanted to practice law.
Yes.
And so the opportunity came up, and Hunter and Hunter, which has now become Appleby, they offered me articles, and it was one of those things where, they were very clear. They said, Philip, we'll offer you articles, but there's no guarantee that you're going to be kept. It's purely about offering you the opportunity. And so when you look at that and you see on the one hand, hey, I have a substantial, pretty decently paying job on the one hand. And then on the other hand, the opportunity to go and do articles, which is, I'll tell you, articles is really kind of down on the bottom level again, because
it's a training contract,
it's a
basically.
big change. Your principals are your bosses. And in some cases, when you are already in a professional, you're at a professional level, some of the bosses are younger than you. So it takes a mindset. But I decided that I wanted to do it. And so I went and did my articles with Hunter and Hunter. And at the end of that, I'm pleased to say that they kept me on and said, hey, listen, we want to keep you. So I think that was a big feather in my bonnet to know not only that I'd completed the articles, but they wanted to keep me, and I stayed on for another 2.5 years after that. And then I moved on and I've started my own practice. So excellent opportunity.
Okay.
Thank Appleby, thank Hunter and Hunter for the opportunity.
Yes.
And which is kind of made the pathway for me to move into my own practice.
Right.
And now almost 18 years in my own practice. So yes.
What sort of what was your area of specialty that you settled into at Hunter & Hunter at the time?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about being a part of a large firm. You do get some opportunities in different aspects. I did some funds work. I did some property work. I did a bit of litigation, and so on. It gave you kind of this rounded view about where you might want to practice. And I practiced my final year at Hunter & Hunter Appleby was kind of more in the property and local, what I call local activity, local work, where you do things that are on a local level as opposed to the international stuff,
finance,
funds and finance and so on and so forth. And I found there too that I always felt better when I'm interacting with people that I know. Whereas with funds, you always there's somebody on the other end of an email. On nowadays, I'm sure it'd be Zoom, but it's just it's not somebody that you're going to interact with on a social level. And I like that part of law, when you actually have a client, you sit down and they talk to you, and you can face them and you can say to them exactly what your thoughts are. You can decide how you're going to deal with their case, and to be real with them about what the possibilities are of success or failure. Whereas funds is kind of not that kind of subject. You get a brief on what the fund should look like, memorandum, offering memorandum, and you create the fund based on the instructions that you're given. And it's back and forth in terms of finalizing it, but it's not the same thing as when you're doing a local litigation type functions and local practice functions here.
Yes, very interesting. So then you go into private practice for yourself and you become an entrepreneur. What were some of the biggest changes, Philip, for you as an entrepreneur versus being in a law firm where you had support? Of course, you've got secretaries and receptionists and accounting teams, and I'm sure in some respects it's a lot easier. But what would you say was the biggest transition for you going into private practice?
On a number of levels, it's completely different when you work for yourself. For one thing, if you don't, they say it in the rough terms, is that you eat what you kill.
Yes, you got to produce.
So you better be able to convince people that your services are worth them having. And you're building something usually from one client at a time. And at the end of the day, you realize it's a cumulative effort of what you've done over the last 3 or 4 years that makes it happen. In early days, I had my moments too where I said, wow, I wonder if I shouldn't go back and ask for my old job. And,
yes.
And I could have, but something about the whole aspect of having entrepreneurial freedom, I think is what it is, that allows you to realize that you can build something to the stage and to the extent that suits you, as opposed to suiting someone else. The things that I didn't miss about Appleby and the big firms, and they're all the same in the sense, is that they expect a certain amount of billable hours, and you're not going to get away with doing that. And it used to be at one point that it would be you build 3 times what would be your annual salary, and then by the time you got into the 4th sum, you'd be into bonus territory. Well, over time, and as the firms have gotten larger, it's now 5, 6 times. So it's difficult work to get into bonus territory to start with. And of course, the other thing, of course, is that as you grow older, I think this is one of the things that I've heard other Caymanians who come out of the large firms say, is that the work-life balance. People want to spend a bit more time with their family. You reach in your midlife, 40s and 50s, do you really want to be spending that kind of really intensive dealing with pure work? Whereas, perhaps you could do something a little bit differently, maybe not as lucrative, but giving you the kind of work-life balance that suits you. And I think that was one of the things that kind of kept me on course. And working for yourself, any entrepreneur would probably say this to you. The first 2 or 3 years of working, it becomes difficult. You wonder where the money is going to come from sometimes.
Yes.
You're really scratching your head.
Absolutely.
But then if you provide an earnest, an honest, and reliable service, it usually starts to balance out. The next piece of business is coming in. And so you're not so worried about the bottom line,
right?
Because the next piece of business is coming in.
Yeah.
And it's
you have to build that
freedom,
customer base.
Freedom as well.
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about you mentioned work-life balance. Let's talk about your family life a little bit. You've got children. I know for sure you have a daughter, because I know your daughter, but you have other kids as well?
That's correct. I have 2 older children from previous relations. One is Martina. She's 39 now.
Yes.
And she's featuring, you'll see her on the campaign trail.
Yes. That's my little
friend. And then I have
friend.
Richard, who doesn't feature so much, but he wishes me well, and he's doing his thing. He's 35. And then I have 2 younger adults, Arik, who is mine biologically, and then I adopted my wife's daughter, and she's mine as well.
Yes.
I only say that to just be clear, because whenever I never stop to think about her being adopted.
Yes.
She's my daughter, and that's how I approach being with her, and that's how she thinks of me, of being her father. So yes, my wife Ilda and I, we live in Port of Lean, where we are today, and we've been married for the last 16 years. Hope I don't get in trouble there, but we've been together 18, 19 years in total, and so we built this family together at this location. And I think that when you look at stability in your life, people really need to pay attention to who their spouse is, because your spouse can make or break you, and I think that we don't give it enough attention to how we evolve and how it happens. Sometimes we're led by more of the emotional side of things, and yes, you need to have love. I know that, but beyond love, you need understanding, and you need someone who's going to be there with you to help when things are not going well, and to enjoy times when things are going well. It makes a lot.
Yes.
I know I wouldn't be running if it wasn't for Hilda and for the family that I have. I just couldn't do this.
Yeah, that's critical. And I know a lot of our listeners will have heard me talk about the importance of, sometimes we have entire shows almost on making that decision of, I say something that sometimes people think is a little bit odd, but I say I can understand the concept of arranged marriages, because you put people together who are compatible on a number of different levels, because you've got to have that core compatibility. In the Western world, we tend to focus on, we love at first sight and all these emotional things that over time, that's not necessarily what's going to sustain you. It's having the foundation of mutual respect, understanding, communication, common goals, being supportive to each other, and those things you can certainly learn how to do, but going into relationships, it's certainly useful if you have a lot of common ground already. So it's interesting to see you give credit to, the personal relationships in your life being so important, to allowing you even to run for political office and, running your own business and lots of things that we do in life. Having that support is so incredibly critical. So thank you very, very much for sharing that. I think that's important for people to know. So here you are now, Philip. Are you still practicing at all, or have you retired?
Yes, actually, I still have my practice.
Yes.
We're in election mode, so
Yes.
for these 2 months that I'm actually campaigning, my practice is being run by someone else, by my colleague, Ms. Katina Anglin. She is continuing to weather the storm there, and so we'll see come the 30th of April where things are,
Okay.
and then obviously we will make arrangements
And take it
going
from there.
forward from that. But
Yes.
again, that's one of the things, I suppose, that if you look at it in terms of freedom, some of the people, if you're working for government, then obviously you've had to give up a government job
Yes.
in order to be able to run for politics. And even if you're running in the private sector, you probably still had to resign, even if they said, listen, we're going to take you back, or probably take you back if things don't work
Right.
out. So it's, in a sense, when I say, if not me, then who? And if I say not now, then when? That's one of the things I think that allows me to make a statement like that, is that having your own practice, you can maneuver a little bit and be able to campaign for a couple of months while your practice still continues on. Although, I can tell you with certainty, one of the things that myself and other practitioners always speak about is that, particularly when we put in a lot of time on boards, is that when you're given civically, you always lose out in your practice, because practices, like any other business, if the owner is there, you're just in a different spot, I think.
Yes.
And my practice is a small practice. It's 3 people, all Caymanians, thank the Lord. But it's a small practice, and yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about your community work over the years, Philip. You mentioned, sitting on boards. So let's talk about some of those boards that you've sat on and how you've contributed outside of your professional life in running your businesses.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. Community service has always been one of those things that I think deeply about. I look back at the 20 years in my early career of being in the police department, and some of the things there. Obviously, people will say, well, you're a policeman, you're being paid for it. But I have a great sympathy when you say it that way, because I know back from my history is that there's so many things there that, strictly speaking, you're not paid for. You do it because it is a part of what is happening. A lot of long nights where you don't have the opportunity to interact with your friends and your family, working shifts. How many times you actually put yourself in harm's way? Sometimes the harm's way is by the people you're even trying to protect. I remember occasions where, a blow was thrown, and it wasn't even intended for me, but it was intended to be at the other person who was, having an interaction with. And of course, a stray blow doesn't have any
Yeah.
particular.
It's going to land where it's going to land. Yeah.
Prisoners escape, and we would have to go out and find. And a prisoner who has escaped is not a nice individual, because he doesn't want to go back. And so that type of interaction and the danger of that type of stuff, I think, is always something that weighs on my mind when I think about public servants and police officers and what they do, which is not only a part of the job, maybe it's a part of the job, but it's kind of is an additional element there that you really stop and think about. And then, of course, as an attorney, as I've gone down the pathway and I've been able to assist with civically, I've been a director on OFREG, which is, deals with the energy and communications regulation in the country. And so I've served as quite a bit of service there, 2 years of service there.
Okay.
I was also a chairman of the Labor Appeals Tribunal. So again, I probably had about 4 or 5 years in totality in that arena. The last 2 years of it would have been as the chairman of the Labor Appeals Tribunal. But again, giving back in terms of making sure that the systems and the rights of people that people are looking, people get dismissed, have they been rightfully dismissed or has been unlawfully dismissed. Make sure that there is things and there's systems in the society here that work, and they work through sometimes us as professionals providing that level of leadership. And then I also think about my pro bono work, and that's always an interesting one because you almost sometimes you don't know where pro bono work starts and where it ends. Because sometimes you take on a minor matter to give somebody a bit of advice, and before you know it, it's down a pathway and it's really, extensive service, and it's pro bono, so I've encountered that numerous times throughout my career. But the one thing that I can think of as well, I think that people miss when they start thinking about attorneys is that, in my case, one of the things that I've been able to do is to provide what I call my will service. And sometimes it's people calling and saying, a loved one on last legs and they need a will. And I've, picked up my bag and gone to the hospital or sometimes the hospice to do that type of work. And it's emotionally challenging because you know these people, but you do it because it's got to be done. And then, beyond that, you find that you know that it's something that matters. It matters to the people who are left behind, and then sometimes it's good emotional stuff too. I remember a matter recently where I helped 2 young boys, young men. I better be careful of that because if they hear me, they're gonna say something. But their mom had left them as basically as orphans, and they had left them a house, and the house was there. It was there for their taking, so to speak. But as they reached adulthood, young adulthood, the administrators of the property, they kind of wanted to just make sure that they completed the transaction. They didn't have the money, but it's always a good thing when you can step up and do something like that, because the positive emotion of that is those 2 boys saying, "Hey, Mr. Phil, thank you so much. We really appreciate that." So it's not always heart-wrenching emotional. Sometimes it's very positive emotional. And I guess I think of service in this way. You take people where you find them.
Yes.
And sometimes for some people, you have to kind of look around and see what it is that you can do. And then at other times, it's there, and that's my idea about public service, about service to the community. If you're a plumber and you pass in a house and you see a leak, hey, why don't you stop and fix it? You see a bulb that's fizzing and you say, there's a concern there, somebody doesn't have the money to kind of fix that bulb. Stop, fix it. I think where you find need, you meet it. And that's kind of been my history. I help out with Hope Foundation, every month I provide a little something there for them. And there's a couple of football associations, clubs that I help out. And that's not to me, those are things that we should just be doing. And I enjoy service. And of course, if you ask me, do I do enough? No, I don't think anyone does enough, because to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yes.
And I think that we need to to always be remembering that. And if we can all remember that we need to do a bit more, we're going to be so much of a better place.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Philip. This has been a very, very insightful interview. I mean, I've certainly enjoyed it, and I know our audience have enjoyed learning a bit more about who Philip Ebanks is. We appreciate the opportunity to sit down, have a little chat with you. It's been such a lovely afternoon. The weather's been, oh my gosh, idyllic in so many ways lately. You know, nice breeze and under the coconut tree. So good luck to you on April the 30th. And thank you so much for this opportunity to get to know you on a one-on-one a little bit more.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as I go out there and canvas, I want to thank Good People Red Day for the opportunity to just let me in on your thoughts about what you find is important in the district and of course on the national issues. And as we continue to make that case, I look forward to hearing from you. You know, we have our WhatsApp number 324-9886 if you want to drop us a WhatsApp. And also as we go along, we'll have our advertisements. We have a YouTube channel. Interestingly, we have the kids. Yesterday, I was at after the church service, I was at at an ice cream place, and one of the other candidates for politics, I know him really well, and they're okay. And he came up to me with his granddaughter, and he said to the granddaughter, "You know who this is?" And she said, "Yes, that's Phil." And he said, how do you know that? I know it because of his song.
Oh, yes.
A lot of people are like, the song resonates with a lot of people. So it's always interesting to see how you're actually going to connect with people. And I think that's the wonderful thing about this experience, is how I'm getting an opportunity to connect with people. And I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, thank you so very, very much, and good luck again.